Hey guys, it's Kevin again, and I figured I would just start out this video by kind of just warning you that things are going to look a little bit different in this one. Uh, Look, Jamaica long story short, I was planning to film this video, around the time I usually did, kind of playing around and, started to film the video, and then I realized that things look a little bit off. The frame rates is unusually slow. The video is looking a bit blurrier. There's something wrong with like the color. It's not as crisp and high def as it should be. And so I wanted to try to figure out what the problem was. I unplugged like my microphone into the camera and then plugged it back in, and it wasn't detecting the audio. So ultimately, I just said, fuck it, I gotta get this video done. And so what I did was I filmed the video and then recorded the audio separately, and that's why it's synced up in that way. But the camera quality still does not look up to snuff with what I've been putting out in recent videos. So just bear with it at this point. It's not going to be permanent. I don't really know what's going on with the camera. I don't really know what I end up doing, but there was clearly some setting I played around with, and it like completely messed with the video quality. Once I figure it out, things will look normal again. I do plan for the finale to hopefully, the video for that to hopefully be a lot better than this and look better in terms of like the actual like presentation of the video. But yeah, just figured I would put that out there just so you don't watch the video and be like, what the fuck happened? What's with the downgrade? There's really like nothing I can do about it. Like I've tried, it's gonna look a little, for lack of a better term, janky, and we're just gonna kind of have to deal with it. So yeah, that's really it. Anyway, enjoy the review. Hey guys, it's Kevin again, here to review the final full week of Big Brother 26. This, of course, is the Final Four, and look, I said it last week, and I'll say it again. I've really loved this season a lot, but I really do feel like we are just at a point where things have just really just gone on a bit too long. That's really the best way for me to sum it up. I feel like there's a lot of stuff this season has done really well, but I do think that making this entire season like 90 days as opposed to like 75 really is just not working out anymore. And I really do think, particularly these last couple weeks, it has very much affected my it has affected some of my enjoyment of the show. I wouldn't say that it has completely tanked the season in any way, shape, or form, but it has made this endgame just feel a little bit more on the slower side of things. And look, very similar to last week, actually. But, this week I think has a big similarity in the sense where there are moments throughout this week that are interesting. There are avenues this week could have taken that could have been something exciting. Unfortunately, it's just not the case. And I think in terms of the weeks of Big Brother that we have discussed, this is easily the most boring. To be honest with you, I did not really keep up with what was going on throughout a majority of this week because there wasn't much happening. And I just don't understand why they needed to do a full week of what ends up happening, because it just ends up being so incredibly dragged out. There's really not a lot to talk about here, and especially in terms of, coverage for this season. I mean, this is easily going to be the shortest one I've done. And look, I know I said that for Final Five, but like I would be very surprised if this one is not somewhat short, because I really just do not have a lot to discuss here. I'm obviously going to try to, find things to talk about, but again, I think we're just at a point this season where things are just really winding down, and I really just think that if they had just done Final Five and Final Four in 1 week and then just gone right to finale, I think that things would be just a little bit more, I think that the momentum of the season would have just done a little bit better. I don't think it would have hurt the momentum in the way that it did. And, I'll talk about it at the end. It doesn't hurt this season or anything. It just, again, really ends up making what's been such an exciting season just feel a lot less exciting, a lot less eventful, especially with just the direction that this has gone in. So, again, I don't have a lot to talk about, but we're just going to go ahead and jump right into it. So what's there there to even talk about this week? Because, of course, we're going to get into Sunday's episode. And look, this episode alone, I think, is the perfect encapsulation of just how unnecessarily dragged out this week is. There's barely anything to really discuss. We have 2 competitions in this episode. It takes up, like, literally, like, half the episode, I think, is the comps. And then there's, like, maybe a good, like, 10 minutes spent on actual strategy. And so again, it's really unnecessary. And it's kind of crazy how, like, last season, despite the fact that I think it was mostly horribly paced, actually got it kind of right when it came to the Final Four. They did 1 episode of the Final Four and they just knocked it all out then. And I think that is absolutely what they should have done here, because this episode in particular, again, it just feels so superfluous overall. There's nothing about this episode that makes me feel like this had to be its own thing, but there are some things to discuss. We do get a moment with Chelsie where she talks about how happy she is that she's really just been able to kind of do everything. Everything that she's wanted to happen has happened, and so she's pretty confident that Rubina's also going to go this week, because that's just kind of how the game's been at this point. She's wanted, a certain situation to happen. She's wanted a person out, and that person is gone, and she really has had no real adversity because, well, MJ's making boneheaded decisions. So, I think it's good that Chelsie is, like, correctly recognize this. I've talked about before how I think it's great that Chelsie is able to kind of hype herself up and see her as, like, this master manipulator, and recognize, like, just how easily it is, how easy she is to fool MJ into doing these things. And I really have just enjoyed getting to see that over the past couple weeks. I think it makes her win that much more impressive, that she's able to get away with the things that she's done. And yeah, one could say that, well, Makensy is just not the greatest player, and you would absolutely be right about that, but I don't think that should at all undermine the effort that Chelsie has put in here. I mean, the time she has really spent in trying to flip MJ and get her to do what's in her best interests and not MJ's best interests, I think has been incredible. And we see another just really great example of that at work this week. There is a moment where MJ talks to Rubina, kind of just trying to cover all her bases. She discusses how, like, she still wants all 3 girls to be at the end. And look, I talked about this last week. I talked about how MJ's just doing way too much at this point. This is completely unnecessary. There really is no reason to try to tell this to Rubina only to then go back on it, especially when it's so early on and you're not even sure what's going to happen. I get it, you're trying to cover your bases here, but if you're going to make some kind of promise like that, you probably shouldn't end up breaking it, especially in the way things end up going down. So again, I think this was just kind of another really dumb move on her part. I get the intention behind it, but I think that the timing, which is a big issue in this house for a lot of people, similar to many conversations, is very much the wrong one, and I think that she did not go about this correctly at all here. But it is then time for the HOH comp, and look, I think we all kind of knew what was going to end up happening here. I'll talk about who ends up winning and things like that, but I really actually liked what this comp was. Basically, it felt like they were kind of doing a reprieve of that AI arena where they had to try to find, like, hidden phrases, and they had to try to match up the pictures with that phrase, and remember, it, like, went on forever, and they literally had to give them the answer. This was basically that again, only was a little bit more simplified. Basically, they have to identify this phrase that's divided into 3 sections. It has a source code. There's, like, 7 rounds, and whoever's going to find it first is going to win HOH. I really like this comp a lot. I think this is another really good example of just how well the show has been really just kind of challenging itself and implementing a bunch of different types of competitions, but keep it fair and equitable mostly throughout. But it does come down to, again, really no surprise here whatsoever with how this HOH goes, because, once again, the trading off between 2 people in this jury phase continues, with Chelsie once again winning HOH, and this is definitely nothing to sneeze at this point. I mean, a win in Final Four is always a great one, but what's very significant about this one in particular is that, and I didn't realize this, is that Chelsie is literally 1 win away from breaking the record of the most HOHs ever by a single contestant. And that's crazy to me, because I guess I just assumed that like that record had already been broken, but apparently it hasn't. No one's had more than 4, and if Chelsie gets one more, which it really does feel like she could. I mean, the final HOH is part 3. It's usually quiz based, and that seems to be where Chelsie excels the most. It really does feel like it might happen, and I think it's really cool that not only is Chelsie going to probably end up winning the game, but she'll also end up breaking this record along the way. It's just yet another little thing to add to her resume of the things that she has done very well. I don't know if she's aware of this, but again, the fact that we've had such a great strategic player on the cast that's able to manipulate people and just dominate the game, but also is this really great competitor. I mean, again, a lot of the time, both are not mutually exclusive, but this time around, that has been the case, and it's just been really great to see how Chelsie has been able to just continue killing all these different competitions. And yes, it is mainly quiz competitions, but she's killed all of them. And this one in particular, I think, was really impressive because Rubina actually did come fairly close. There was a point where it seemed like Rubina was maybe going to win this, but ultimately it does come down, it does end up going to Chelsie. And I think from this point, we kind of knew what was going to happen. And that's kind of the thing. The rest of this episode, I mean, there's not really much of anything else to talk about. She has conversations with MJ and Cam, handles it very well, I think, because what she kind of wants to do is make them believe that she is just putting them up as a pawn and taking Rubina off, and keeping Rubina off so then she can then renom her and not want to put either of them up next to each other. But then she can also talk to Rubina and tell her that she does not want her to constantly be this pawn in this game. She doesn't want her to constantly go on the block and have to fight for herself. She wants to kind of give her some time to breathe. And all around, I think this was great work from Chelsie. I mean, just seeing the way she maneuvers all these different conversations and it gets them to kind of rationalize, them going on the block, Cam being okay with it, MJ being okay with it, I think was really impressive. And yes, obviously, like, nominations don't really matter that much at Final Four, admittedly, but I still think it really is good work from Chelsie. The way that she was able to micromanage all these different conversations here, I think was just really great to see. There's a moment with Cam, she's kind of like gassing him up about how he would have won the competition, but because she buzzed in first, he did. And again, I've said before, I think a good player knows how to really handle their cast, and what Chelsie has done so well over these past couple weeks is form such close bonds with everybody that she knows exactly the right thing to say to them every single time. When you're talking to Cam, you want to make him feel like he is this great competitor and that he just hasn't had his moment yet, but that you're rooting for him to have it. And that's exactly what she does here. When you're talking to Rubina, you want to try to appeal to emotion. You know that she is somebody who sees herself as kind of drawing dead, and you want to make her feel as included as you possibly can, and I think she does a good job with that. And then when you're talking about MJ, you kind of want to frame it as, well, I need Cam to feel okay. I need to feel like you're going on the block and, Cam is really the target here. The way she kind of phrased it to her, talks about how, even if she were to win the veto, she would use it on her. Again, I think it's just really great. Just really, really great example of what she's done best this game. Really doing a great job of just knowing the right thing to say to all three of them. And I was just, again, really impressed by the way that she handled this conversation overall. I think that she did a really good job here. I've been, I've praised her up and down this entire season, but I think this is just another example of what Chelsie really does best, and I think that she did really great work here. Now, admittedly, MJ, it's not hard to convince her to do much, but again, I think getting her to feel like, okay, Cam is still the target here, I'm going to Final 3 with you and Rubina. I think, again, just the way she's been able to cover all her bases and do it in such a flawless manner, that's what is so impressive to me. A lot of the time when you do stuff like this, it gets back to someone and they kind of realize what you're doing, but Chelsie has done such a great job of just, again, bonding with people in such a personal light that they take what she says to heart. They take what she says as irrefutable proof that that's what's happening. They don't even need the evidence to know. They just believe that, what she's saying is truthful. And again, I think that just really speaks to how well she's played this game. So I think that was really great, but we do get to the nominations. It ends up being MJ and Cam. And again, I think this was the best move for Chelsie. It's a good way to kind of keep Rubina on your side, not make her believe that she is your target, but also not have to choose between MJ and Cam. By putting both of them up, you don't have to show which one you actually are more loyal to. And what I think is great about Chelsie is that it doesn't seem like she's playing to do that until she literally has to. Like, if she wins the final HOH, that's when she proves where her loyalty was. But right now, she doesn't want to have to do that. And I think it honestly is a really good way to prevent yourself from having to make unnecessary moves at the end of the game. A lot of the time, you are a little too candid, and because of that, you find yourself in this position where everyone kind of knows what you're going to do. What I think is good about this is that Chelsie is really keeping her options as wide open as possible, and I think this was just really great to see. So, again, some really good conversation. So, I think really good Nam said here. Only other thing to really talk about in this episode is that Cam does discuss how if he wins the veto, he likely is putting up MJ. He wants to take MJ out. He feels like MJ is the big threat here, and he really wants to try to make that happen. Whereas MJ, it seems like, is at this point going to vote out Cam. But then we go right into the veto, and it's basically a day's comp. Now, what I will say is, in a season of mostly equitable comps, this was definitely the most, generic endgame type comp that we've seen. This felt way more on par with what we expect to see in a Big Brother comp, and I don't really mean that in a positive light. I feel like that this was a lot of just kind of running back and forth. They're given a video and they have to try to figure out what day this clip ended up happening. I think that's a cool idea, but again, having them run back and forth like that, it immediately is putting some people at a disadvantage. And so, I still praise them for the equitable comps, but it does not appear that they have changed the endgame in any significant way. So it kind of makes sense why it goes in the direction that it does. Ultimately, it comes down to Cam and MJ, with the winner not being determined because they decide to end this on a cliffhanger, which, again, it just really shows how much they are starving for content all week. They don't really have a lot to show here. They don't really have a lot to get us excited about. So I think this was just another key example of just why we didn't even need these 2 episodes overall. This easily could have been a 2-hour episode, but they stretched it into multiple days, and I just feel like this was completely unnecessary, especially the fact that they don't even get to finish this comp by the episode's end. All right, so let's just get into Thursday's episode. Again, no what we didn't see. We're at Final Four. Most of the week is them kind of talking about how they don't understand why the game is still going. I don't either. So there's nothing to talk about. Generally, there's nothing to talk about here. But we do get down to the end of the veto comp in Thursday's episode, and it turns out, oh my god, MJ has won the veto. I know, what a shock. I was really pulling for a Cam win here. Look, the guy has spent the past couple weeks just feeling so disheartened at the fact that he hasn't been able to win. I just really wanted to see it happen, and I was really pulling for him to win that Final Four HOH, and or win the Final Four veto, and seeing what he was really going to do. He had talked about potentially cutting MJ and taking Rubina. I've said before, I think that's the move he kind of needed to make. But it would, of course, come down to, is he actually able to do it? And he doesn't. And so we get to MJ's plans here, and I will say, I've given MJ a lot of flack in the past couple weeks, especially. As you know, I'm not very fond of her as a game player. I think that she has just made some really boneheaded decisions that just don't make any sense whatsoever. But yet she constantly convinces herself make sense, and they most of the time don't. But I will give her credit, at least at this particular point, it seemed like she was on the right track. It seemed like maybe this was actually going to work, because she talks to Chelsie and kind of tells her that she's kind of conflicted. She doesn't really know what to do at this point. How close Cam really was, and that, while she's placed trust in him, she kind of feels like he's done better than Rubina. And so it did kind of seem like through this conversation that, maybe MJ's kind of understanding it. To me, at least, at this point in the week, it seemed like, okay, MJ's been very adamant about this all-girls Final Three. She's had conversations with Chelsie, and Chelsea's told her that 3 girls have never made it to the end. That's a lie, but Chelsea's done a good job of manipulating her into believing it. She's talked a lot about how much she thinks Rubina is good for her game and how worried she is about Cam and how she's getting more fearful of the fact that he might not end up taking her. I thought, okay, maybe MJ actually, even though despite all the terrible gameplay, she might actually end up making the correct move here. But no, this is still MJ we're talking about, and, similar to any week, the second that Chelsie hears this, she correctly recognizes, well, I have some work to do, and I really gotta try to do what I can to get her to save, to save Cam here and not vote out Rubina, and it seemed like, again, it was going to be quite the Herculean effort, on her part, because Rubina and MJ do have this conversation where Rubina just kind of talks about how she wants to see women sitting at the end, and not just for her but for bigger reasons, and how if Cam is there, that there's a really good chance that he's going to take Chelsie. And I think that Rubina does a pretty okay job here. She does a good job at saying the right things, talking about how Cam's going to take Chelsie, how she would take MJ, and that she feels like, she doesn't have that much of a shot at winning. I think all of that is very good until, and the episode doesn't really show this, you find out that this pitch is literally on Wednesday, when throughout the rest of the week, Rubina's not really talking to MJ all that much. And I feel like this is really where she drops the ball. I think, again, Rubina has the right idea. She's saying the right things, but it's not at the right time. She need to get in there a lot earlier, because what Rubina didn't realize is at this point, MJ kind of already had her mind made up. Chelsie spends the majority of the week really trying to turn her against Rubina, talking about how Rubina has 2 locked-in votes, and how Rubina's this big, jury threat and things like that, and how Rubina might not even potentially take her to the end, and how her and Cam have a really close relationship. And again, you just gotta really praise Chelsie here. I think that she recognizes, what she needs to do, that Rubina is somebody that is this big wild card. She almost won this HOH. She very well could have made a move that was not in her favor. One of the 3 of them would have been out if that was the case. And so I think it's smart for Chelsie to just go ahead and continue working on MJ, because it does seem like she's generally convinced her at this point. Despite the fact that Rubina is making good points, unfortunately, it's kind of moot to MJ. It doesn't really seem like MJ is all that receptive. And the only reason they kind of make it seem like she's receptive in the diary room is, again, to keep things a little bit more interesting. She does have this conversation with Cam where he kind of talks about how he could be very beneficial to her, and that, to even have a chance, he kind of need a shock factor, kind of hinting at the idea that, like, if he was to win the final HOH, that he would cut Chelsie, which I don't think is something that MJ's going to be that receptive to, considering that she wants to take Chelsie to the end for some reason, because Chelsea's just done that great of a job that MJ feels like she has to take Chelsie to the end, the 2 women of faith and things like that. But yeah, I think that Cam, he does what he needs to do, but his points, when you really think about it, just don't make a lot of sense. He constantly harps on the idea that Rubina talked to her at the last second, and that he got to her quicker, and also the fact that the 3 of them have been working together. And these points aren't necessarily great, but because MJ is so convinced by what Chelsie was telling her, she already is kind of all in for this plan. So despite the fact that I do credit Rubina, and I think she put in some good work here, I think that work was just done a little bit too late, and there just isn't a lot she really could have done to try to save herself. We do eventually get down to the veto ceremony, and not much to talk about here. MJ obviously uses the veto on herself. Cam does give a little speech saying that, how much he appreciates all of them, and how if he can be a benefit to keep him around. There is a really funny moment where Julie brings up shout out to the dogs at the crib, and how he didn't mention that, and it also gets Rubina to follow suit. That to me was one of the only highlights of this episode episode. There's not a lot to really like about this episode. It's kind of boring for the most part because, again, you know that MJ is going to make the most suboptimal move and you're just kind of waiting for her to do it. And the show is trying to trick you into thinking that that's not going to happen, but you know that's the direction that things are kind of headed in. So, again, I think all right pitches from the both of them. Rubina does mention in her speech how, she loves C3 win at the end, that it hasn't been done before, and she loves and supports all of them, and that it's been a really crazy summer. But, MJ then goes ahead and does evict Rubina, and look, I can't be shocked at this point. I can't be shocked that MJ is just continually doing the dumbest shit and not doing anything that makes sense for her, nothing that is directly benefiting her. I mean, this in particular though, like I've taken a lot of issue with her game. This one in particular though, like I just don't understand. I can't quite wrap my head around why she would do this, why she would think that this is a good idea. I mean, Rubina's literally telling you that she's gonna take it to the end. What reason does she have to lie at this point? There's 4 people left. You know that she doesn't want to see Chelsie at the end. She's hinted to you about that. She wants to see this she wants to see this final 3 girls happen. Like, who do you think she's taking at that point? And then also, if she even says to MJ in her speech, like, you can cut me at 3. If someone is telling you can take me at 3, they are being sincere at that point. That means that they have your back and they generally do have your best interest in the game. And so I just don't understand how, because of the fact that Rubina waited at the last second, how all of this is kind of negated. Again, I think maybe had she had put more effort in the beginning of the week, maybe this could have saved her, but it kind of just seems like all that needed to happen was for Chelsie to once again work her magic, and MJ was just so easily convinced, and so she just ends up evicting Rubina here, which is very disappointing, because I kind of wanted to see that final 3 happen of all the women. They've been talking about it constantly, and I kind of wanted to see, how that would all end up playing out, but Rubina does go and gives a pretty good speech here. She's asked about Tucker, saying that she hopes that the 2 of them kind of end up lasting, but that they're also 2 grown adults, and so she is prepared for sort of any outcome, but she's hoping for the best. She talks a little bit about MJ and how she was sincere with what she was saying. Oh my god, I can't believe that she was actually sincere in those conversations. Who would have thunk it? Seriously, who would have thought that in those conversations that she was having with MJ, that she had every reason to be honest with, that she was being honest with her. I know, what a concept, but you can see that she's not very happy about her decision. She talks about how she knew that Cam, Chelsie, and MJ had a final 3. That was pretty obvious to her. They were just kind of giving that energy the entire time with how when Kimo was going. She talks about how, she could tell that MJ and Cam were always closer to Chelsie. So again, I think Rubina had some of the right ideas here. Again, I do think this was an all right, eviction speech overall. There's not really a ton to talk about, but I do think there were definitely some things to latch onto, especially the fact that it seems like despite the fact what MJ did, Rubina still wants to maybe vote for her. She's still considering it until you get to her goodbye message. And I've said it before and I'll say it again, like, her jury management is horrendous. The way she's trying to rationalize her reasoning for taking Rubina out, you can just see how little sense it truly makes. She says to Rubina that Rubina's a big threat and that Rubina was going to win the game and that she needs to play for herself. But, like, what resume does Rubina have? What has she done that is separate from Kimo and T-Core? Like, there just isn't much there, and you can see Rubina has this look on her face like, thank you, but, like, seriously, what have I done? How was I a threat? Because she absolutely wasn't. So I love that Rubina's, like, very self-aware here that this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. I think that makes it all the better, to be honest, and I thought that honestly was just a lot of fun to watch. Just seeing, like, her reaction and just the pure befuddling look on her face of like, what exactly are you talking about? But then followed up by this great and quick, but then followed up by this very quick little goodbye message from Chelsie, but a very effective one where she says like, hey, I hope, I know you want a woman to win this game, essentially saying, hey, I could be that woman. I could be the one that you vote for. And so I thought that was really great. I guess I'll talk about Rubina a little bit overall. Look, I really did enjoy Rubina on the show. I think that she's a very fun and energetic presence, and that really did translate, and that really did elevate, just my enjoyment of her. Did that translate into good gameplay, though? Not really. I think she had her moments, for sure. I still do appreciate just how much she fought for herself. Every time she was on the block, she really did make an effort to try to campaign. I don't always think she said the right things. I don't always think she said enough, but she had the right ideas. She had decent reads on the game. Although it's pretty obvious at this point, I don't think her reads were necessarily all that bad. Again, I think her problem is similar to Kimo and T-Core. She just was way too passive. And for Rubina in particular, I always thought her biggest issue was that she tied herself so much to that trio when she had so much more wiggle room beyond them. Like, yes, T-Core and Kimo were working with each other, but Rubina was the third. Rubina could have gone literally anywhere she wanted. Yes, obviously they saved her, but when she didn't go on Quinn's HOH, that was her opportunity to really try to make some headway with some other people, and she just never really took advantage of that. Someone like an Angela or a Leah, she just kind of counts out. Someone like, MJ, she really did not put that much effort into until, I would say, Janky Week. That's when that relationship really started to go somewhere. When it comes down to someone like, say, Cam, her and Cam had a really good relationship. I enjoyed their interactions, but it never felt like either of them really were utilizing how good of a connection they really had, and that maybe they needed to sit next to each other. So again, she had some good ideas, but they just never really executed into something that's really ended up, elevating her game to that next level. She was kind of in this spot where she was just kind of drawing dead. She fought for sure, and there were definitely moments where I thought she was going to go and she didn't. But I just feel like there was so much more that she could have done, and she just didn't really do it. I think her best move, in my opinion, is how she handled things with Leah. I thought that was really great. The way that she, told Chelsie what Leah was saying, making sure that Leah went. I thought that was a good move from her. Like I said, I like the way that she was able to kind of continue her game after Tucker left, but after Tucker left, she again commits herself so much to this trio, she just doesn't really end up solidifying anything with anybody else, and she's tied to them the entire season when I think she easily could have branched off and made other connections, and she just didn't really do that. So again, I really like Rubina overall. I was honestly kind of pulling for her to be in the final three. I really wanted to see it happen. I really liked her optimism. I really liked just her courageousness and her tenacity. I liked that about her as a player. Again, I just really wish that she had just done just a little bit more of what she said she was going to do, and less of what we've been seeing all season with the trio and constantly saying, well, we should do this, and then not doing anything about it until she absolutely needed to. And that really was my biggest issue, is that I just wish she went that next extra step and did things the second she thought of doing them, and not 5 days later, because especially this round, that really is what hurt her. I think if she has this conversation with MJ after MJ wins the veto, maybe she's a bit more receptive to it. Now, I still think that MJ probably makes the wrong move, but I think that there still would have been a little bit more of a chance for things to turn around, and maybe you could have convinced her, but unfortunately, that's not what she ended up doing. She waited until literally the last second, and it just didn't end up being nearly as effective as it could have. So, yeah, again, really like Rubina a lot. Thought that she was fun to watch, but as a game player, similar to a lot of people this season, very frustrating to watch overall. All right, so the only other thing to really talk about in this episode is two things. One, we have a jury segment, And it's really not much at all. Like, even more so this time around. The first one at least gave us a general idea of where these house guests are at, how they're really feeling about the people at the end, how they've kind of, reacted to them, being evicted from the game. At least we got some of that. We had some fun moments with like Quinn and Leah and Angela's reaction to it. This one gave us basically nothing. We do get some confirmation on Quinn and Leah. They're taking things slow. They're not really sure where the relation was going. Again, like I said, it's really up to them on what they want to do. I'm not going to be one of those people who are like, this is what they need to do with their relationship. I'm going to, I think that they are two grown adults and that they should be allowed to do whatever they want to do in their relationship, and I should not get to have an opinion. Like, straight up, I really just shouldn't, because it does seem like they generally care about each other. And I think regardless of what happens, they're going to have a strong connection after the season, whether that's as friends or more, but we'll really just have to see. We get Kimo. He joins the jury house, and he is very pro-Chelsie for the most part. What a shock to everybody. Most people at this point are pro-Chelsie, although Angela is starting to maybe respect MJ's game a bit more, seeing her as this compy, seeing her as someone who has really kind of gone from the bottom to the top, and like, sure, she has that story, and I think that is something that is going to help her, is that she does have a case. It's just how she's going to be able to present it, and I think that that's something that Angela can easily be talking out of. I think that you have a conversation with Angela about what has MJ truly done, and I think you get her back on board with Chelsie. So again, there's just not really much in terms of like, is there any sort of divide? It seems like the consensus is mainly Chelsie. There's not even like any sort of, reuniting of T-Core and Kimo. We don't really get to see that. We don't get to see like Kimo talking about, what happened with Cam and all that stuff. Like, there's so much that they could have shown us, and they just haven't. It feels like the jury house is just not really a priority this season, and it's disappointing because I always enjoy getting to see it, but 2 segments in, it honestly feels like you could have just skipped right to the round table at this point, because it just feels like they're just not really doing much of anything. Like, I enjoy seeing these house guests again because I think they're entertaining, but can I really say we've gotten anything of substance other than just really obvious stuff that we kind of already knew? Not really. I just feel like it just hasn't really given much of anything, and I'm honestly pretty disappointed by what we've ended up seeing. But on the bright side, we do have a new roundtable announcement, which I have not talked about. I don't know why I haven't talked about it on any of these videos, but it was announced like a couple weeks ago. Dr. Will is stepping down from the roundtable. I definitely think that this was the right decision. I could tell last season especially, he was just not really feeling it anymore. Really seemed like he was going through the motions. Didn't even really seem like he was watching the show that much, so I think it just kind of was a matter of time before he ended up stepping down. No, word on whether or not this was like his decision or whether or not this was because he's going to be on Deal or No Deal Island Season 2, but I digress. The reveal we end up getting here is one that I was really pulling for, because it turns out the new roundtable host is Taylor Hale, and yeah, I am honestly pretty overjoyed about this. This was the one that I was really pulling for. I think when we think of modern Big Brother and we think of like the gold standard, Taylor Hale is that standard. I mean, her entire game is all about survival. Her entire game thrives in the social aspect of it all. This is not someone that won all these comps. This, yes, she won some comps, but like, that was not really what her game was about. It was about fighting. It was about survival. It was about adapting. And those are, those are elements that I think that, is very good to have in a roundtable host. Plus, there's the fact that she has really stayed up to date with Big Brother. She's become more of a fan than she was after her season than before, and I think it's been really great to see. She's stayed very active. She's been very often just praising the show, talking about different twists, appearing on different podcasts. So yeah, I honestly don't think they could have picked a better choice here. I'm just really excited to see what she ends up doing. I think she's going to really do a great job of just laying out the questions and, really just bringing so much personality and fun to the roundtable. I think it's going to be a different vibe than what we're used to seeing, but I think, honestly, it's going to feel very refreshing. I think having Dr. Will in, after probably 19, it just didn't really feel like he was as into it anymore, and I feel like getting someone like Taylor, who is very active, who has been avidly watching the show, and now has developed this, like, entertainment news sort of, this entertainment news sort of life for herself, and, has been keeping up with this season and probably has a lot of burning questions. I think that is really the way to go, and I think having Taylor be brought in is really, like I said, kind of the face of the new era. I think that really is the way to go about it. So like I said, I really don't think they could have picked a better choice here. Only other thing to talk about is the Jag interview, which, what's there to say, truly? I don't know what to really say about this other than I like his answers. I like that he said that, the worst move of the season was what MJ did to Leah, but then conversely, the best move is Chelsie convincing her to do it. And I would be inclined to agree. I think that week is so encompassing of this season because you have this terrible work from MJ and her not realizing what she's doing, but then you also got to give Chelsie her flowers and show just how much effort she's putting in, how much of a strategist she is, get to show this more sort of devious side to her that we hadn't seen yet in the game. And it really just ended up just further appreciating our love for her as a player and the potential that she had as a player, really just finally living up to it. I definitely agree with his answers there. He feels like Chelsie is pretty much like the hands-on favorite to win the game. He does mention how he thinks that Rubina doesn't have much of a shot. Cam, he wants to maybe see win, but he doesn't really know if he does. He also talks a little bit about how hard it is to make the decision at the Final Four. Jag is also somebody who I don't think made the right move, although yes, obviously he did beat that. I still think in retrospect that him making the move that he did the Final Four might not have been the greatest one, but again, other than that, just not really much to say about this interview. Feels like it was just kind of there to pad out the time because they really just didn't have all that much to show. They even show like a filler segment of like Cam making a sandwich and everyone like kind of scrutinizing him for it. So yeah, again, just not really much to discuss here at all. Okay, so now I think let's just go ahead and talk about this Final Three because, look, I think if we're really talking about these past couple weeks of this season, I think this was easily the most predictable outcome. I think as the weeks went on and we just saw how strong this trio was becoming, the fact that they are like the Final Three really isn't that much of a shock. I really just feel like this was the most likely outcome. Do I think it's the most interesting one? Yes and no. I think it's fun to watch because you have like the dynamic of Cam and MJ. Both of them think that Chelsea's going to take them to the end and not knowing whether or not that's actually going to happen. Then you have MJ who feels like she's played just as strong of a game as Chelsea's and is ready to kind of advocate for herself and is fully ready to like bring her to Final Two, and you're going to eventually she's eventually going to come to that realization during Chelsea's, speech that, oh, I was played the entire time, and it's going to be really fun to watch as a result. But then you also have Cam, who's talked about potentially cutting Chelsie, which I don't think is going to happen, considering, well, we'll get into that when we talk about parts 1 and 2, and the results of that, but other than that, again, there's just not really a ton to talk about with this Final Three that I haven't already said. I mean, Chelsie has just played such an incredible game at this point. It just kind of is overshadowing everything. The fact that she literally has gotten everything that she's wanted. She has, gotten all the people out of the game that were potentially going after her. She now has a Final Three where both of them want to take her to the end. I mean, you got to give her that credit. And I really am just impressed by the work that she's been putting in this week, even in a point where it seems pretty, locked. She still has done everything she can to maintain that what she needs to happen is what happens. And I think that is just such a underrated skill in terms of her as a player. Yes, it seems kind of obvious, but oftentimes, you don't express, and we've seen this a lot this season, if you don't express enough what you want to happen, it might not end up happening because you didn't say what you needed to. Chelsie has always said the right thing at every given time, recognized when she needed to do it, recognized, what it's going to do for her, how it's going to put her in a better position, how she's going to be able to maneuver that round. She's just done such a flawless job that I just don't see many scenarios where she doesn't win the game at this point. It just seems like such a done deal, and I don't even think it is really worth harping on the possibility of MJ or Cam winning, because I just don't see it. I really just don't see it. The only thing I see is MJ and Chelsie in a final two, and MJ giving some of the most baffling answers I think we've ever seen, and that alone sounds pretty hilarious, and I really do want to kind of see that happen, because I think it would be a really fun sight to behold. But in the same vein, I can still see a scenario where, because of Chelsie playing this very dominant game, I can see her making a cutthroat move and cutting MJ here. I can absolutely see her doing that, but I generally do think that she kind of needs to take MJ. Like, the speech that she has given throughout the past week is that much more effective if the person that is sitting next to you is the one that you have been manipulating, is the one that has been putting in all of this work to hurt their own game, and not realizing that she was hurting her own game, not realizing that this was what she needed to do. And the thing with MJ is that, like, she even knows, like, what moves need to be made, but again, because of Chelsie, she finally, she always finds a way to talk herself out of making the better move for herself. And I think just that idea of, you are sitting next to the person that essentially is guaranteeing you a win, I think that is very effective, and I really do kind of want to see that happen, because I think it'd be really a fun fight. When it comes to Cam, I mean, I don't really know what he would say. I think it'd be fun either way, but I don't really feel that strongly about a Cam and Chelsie final two. Maybe it would be fun to watch, but I feel like most of it would be him just kind of coming to the realization that, like, it's not happening. He's spent so much time in the past couple weeks just really feeling very defeated, feeling like he can't win the game because he hasn't won those comps, and I feel like that really is what has hurt Cam. I think his overall drive to win the game was based on comp abilities, and that's really what he came in feeling like, I got this in the bag, I'm gonna be fine. And that hasn't happened, and he's had to kind of recognize that as the season has gone on, and he's never really been able to pivot away from that. I think, even in the beginning of the season, he was seen as a physical threat, even if he hadn't won any comps. So I think Cam kind of convinced himself that, like, oh, I'm going to beast through these challenges, and that just hasn't really happened. So, I just don't know what he's really going to say to advocate. I think there are things he can definitely say. I think the way that he was very forthright in multiple rounds this season, knowing what needed to happen and making them happen, I do think is impressive. But then you look at, like, the Kimo round, where he could have gone his way, and he ultimately decided to not go in that direction, and decided to vote out Kimo and listen to Chelsie. And I think that does hurt his game quite significantly, because up to that point, it seemed like he was kind of getting his way, but now he really hasn't since then. Kimo and Rubina, those were really, like, his inroads, besides Chelsie and MJ, and he didn't take as much advantage of them as he should have, and I think that's something else he could have maybe advocated for. So it's hard. I really do think it's hard if it's Cam and Chelsie. I think it's an even easier win for Chelsie at that point, because Cam, I just don't think is going to do a great job of articulating his game. We'll really just have to see, but I just don't really think that's going to happen. Not that MJ's going to articulate it very well either, but I do think that, again, her speech is just that much more effective if she's next to her. So that's really it in terms of, like, what I have to say. I think it's pretty obvious what's going to happen tonight. I would be very shocked if it went in any other direction, just, again, with just how this season has been. It's been one of those outcomes that's felt so, like, just, it's already predetermined. It's one of those things where it just feels like Chelsea's winning this game. This is what's going to happen. There really is no other scenario, and that does sound a little boring, but when it's a game that is as strong as Chelsea's, it honestly isn't as boring. It makes it a little bit more exciting to know that the person who's played such a dominant game is going to win. That hasn't happened in quite a few seasons, and if she wins, she's easily the most dominant winner we've had in years. She is the first, certainly the most dominant female winner we've had in years. So, there's definitely just a lot to get excited about when it comes to Chelsie winning. The other two, like I said, if they manage to win, then cool. I just don't see it at this point. I really just don't see it. So again, I just don't think there's anything more worth talking about here. Only thing to really else discuss is AFP, and this is what I will say about it. Normally, I would be coming onto here pushing very hard for somebody to win. This year, I don't give a fuck. Like, straight up, I don't. And why? Because this cast, aside from, like, maybe a couple people, has been really great. And so, anyone that ends up winning, I do think is deserving. If it's Tucker, great. I think Tucker did such a great job of just setting the unhinged and very, like, unpredictable feel of this season, really just flipping, the game on its head in a way we haven't seen before. Not in a way that was like, good gameplay, but in a way that was really exciting to watch. And I really liked the way that he was trying to like break all the conventional norms of like the way the game was played. And he was just such a just wild and unpredictable player to watch. If it's Angela, she started off giving us crazy eyes, and that kind of set the tone for the season. And from there was just such a fun player that was so authentically herself in the best ways possible. Even if it's like T-Core, like, great. I think T-Core, is just such a fun, very positive spirits. I, really enjoyed the way that she did play this game. I didn't love the way she played the last week of the game, but prior to that, I was very impressed by her gameplay. And I think that, she was definitely someone where really, I think the only rival to Chelsie, the only person who I think could have potentially beaten Chelsie at the end, I think really is T-Core. And then anybody else, like, Cedric, Quinn, Brooklyn, Joseph, Kimo, Rubina, like, Leah, I will be behind it. I don't really care who wins America's favorite player, because generally this has just been such a great cast. And that is the last thing I will say, is that no matter what happens in this finale, this is a great season either way, and it is definitely bittersweet to see it come to an end. Normally, when we're at this point of the show, I'm like begging for it to be 9 o'clock and for the finale to happen and for everything to just kind of wrap up and we can just call it a day on this, and we can just, call it a day on this season. But that hasn't been the case this time around, because even though, yes, these last couple weeks I think maybe dragged out a bit, that's just been because of the structure. It's not because of what's going on. It's not because of the house. It's not because of the gameplay or anything like that. It's just because I think it's just gone on a bit too long, and naturally it just isn't as exciting to watch when there's an outcome that could literally happen that day, but for some reason they are halting it for days and days and days, and there's just, it just feels unnecessarily stretched out. That's not because of how bored I am with the season. I've loved this season pretty much through and through, and I think regardless of what happens, like, that will remain the case here. So yeah, like I said, I'm coming into this finale really just a little bit sad that it's coming to an end, because I think the season has just been so fantastic. I've loved getting to cover it, but really hoping that this is a great finale, really hoping that it delivers. I'm very excited to see how everything ends up going down. We already know the winners of parts 1 and 2, but I'm going to save that for the other video. Also, the recap episode I'll talk about in the finale as well. There's not much to discuss there, obviously, but I will try to give just a little bit of input where I can with that. But other than that, guys, that's really it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what you guys thought of the Final Four overall. Like I said, I know this was more on the shorter side. Really just not that much to talk about this week. It was fairly straightforward. There was a possibility that maybe things were headed in a different direction, but it just ended up being the most predictable outcome that we really could have seen, and really just leading closer to that very elusive victory for Chelsie, a very deserving win for Chelsie that I think we've really been kind of hyping up for the past couple weeks now. But other than that, that's really it for this video. As always, if you enjoy this video, I have a ton of other content on this season, going all the way back to the cast assessment. Very fun video to watch, by the way, because my god, was I wrong about so many of them. And that's what's been so great about this season, is that so many people played so differently than I expected them to. Some of them I was kind of dead on about, but like, throwback to when I thought Quinn was like the person to win this season. Yeah, that's very funny to watch in retrospect, but definitely check that out. I'm also covering the season of Survivor. I am behind by 2 episodes, but I do plan to catch up in the next couple days. I'm also covering Agatha All Along and the Penguin. I know I haven't done a great job at staying up to date with that, but I'm going to try to continue to do so. Now that Big Brother's winding down, I'll probably have more time to do that. I'm also, as well as a plethora of movie and TV reviews, so if any of that interests you, I definitely do recommend checking out my channel, and also consider subscribing. Would really love for you to be a part of all of that. But that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you guys later. Okay, bye. Don't worry about your life.